So this is a spontaneous one again. I'm going to talk about some things and try and cut down on being repetitive. The entities forcibly connected to me. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to best say it. There are several, but there are three main ones. There is one on each side, left and right. And then there is one that stands off to the side, on the right side. Because these are parasites, demons, whatever it is that you want to call them, trying to ask them what their names are doesn't do any good. You can ask for a name, and they might give you one, but then they'll give you a different one 5 minutes later. Most of what comes out of their vomit holes is demon speak, lies. And it's a matter of critical thinking, logic, deduction, triangulation, connecting dots. And their behavior and what they don't say in order to get the truth of things. Since I cannot 100% say exactly who these entities are, there is certainly a lot of implication done by these entities. The one that stands off to the side, on my right side, implies that he is an angelic. And because they wear, like jackets, frequencies and energies that they have raped from benevolent beings, this entity is wearing very high frequencies and vibrations. And tries to pass himself off. Sorry for the repetition, but like he's an angelic. Because this entity has been there for over 10 years, there has been forced interaction with that entity. To date, I feel and perceive that entity to be a reptilian. And because he implies that he is of a very high status, and because I perceive him to be a reptilian, it feels like he could be either the leader of that species or one that is high ranking in that, and just in his species, he would be one that's higher up in the hierarchy of that species. He constantly monitors what the other two are forcing. The one on my right side is a human vessel, male. Implies that he is the head of the Illuminati. I do not have proof of that. He is insane. And what would be a word that's worse than insane? That's what he is. He's sick, sadistic, twisted. And okay, so that's that one. On the left side is a female that I perceive to be also reptilian. Both the male and female use clones to forcibly connect to my being against the full revocation of my consent. The one claiming to be the leader of that group uses a clone of himself that he operates. The female reptilian I have sometimes thought also of the same group, but possibly either hybridized or possessed by a reptilian. Also uses a clone to forcibly connect to me. Those three entities have been forcibly connected to me (24/7) for about 7 years now. Before that time, it was just other, I would say, insane, psychotic human vessels. Until things got to a point when I started fighting back and using my abilities, are when these three entities started being present. The one that stands far off on the right that monitors is one that seems to sometimes possess the male on the right. They are working more as a team, and the male that claims to be the leader of the group it sometimes does seem possessed, especially at certain times when what they're forcing, especially with regards to the cloning torture, when they what they've done in the past is connected, because they have done remote SRA and connected a clone to torture, rape, and then murder the clone, and then force those visions and sensories of that clone into my mind and try to make me feel those sensories. When I started fighting back and using my abilities, is when the one that stands off to the right, that monitors, started to become more involved and started to force more interference, or just started to become more involved. And the more I fight back and use my abilities, then their fuckery becomes worse. Because reptilians are not used to humans really fighting back, or even knowing about what they're forcing on humans. Reptilians don't expect humans to really know, and if they do know, they expect those humans to be in massive fear. They are, when I started to fight back and use my abilities, I get the feeling that they were shocked by that, and they were not used to that. I do not have fear of them, and I do not have fear of that group. And my goal is obviously to disconnect them, to terminate them, and to terminate, implode, and or collapse this inverted time loop matrix. because of what they have been forcing on humanity for many millennia. Don't get hit, don't get hit, don't get hit. Oh my gosh. There was a stray dog that tried to run across the road. They are trying to interfere with my emotional body right now, and they're trying to interfere with my thoughts. I hope that you are patient. I am trying to speak quickly so there's no lag and no repetition. As the reptilians are not used to this, and they are working on an agenda and have certain goals. The more I overcome with what they're forcing, the one off to the right that monitors, his anxiety level goes through the fucking roof. And then that also transfers to the other two. The female, well, they're all vicious, but the female one is extremely, I would have to say even more so. And has been I stated it in the last recording, or I talked about it in the last recording, but that female entity is still trying to do that. And has implied that this is what the reptilians do, and that entity expects to let's just say they are working hard on their goals. And I have refused consent and continue to do so every day, all day, and use my abilities to disconnect them and move them to universal laws as much as I possibly can. I've talked about how they use the frequency weaponry, and they're so insane that they're oftentimes they play with frequencies like this is a game. And this is not a game. Most certainly not. And I'll just say that there should not be any manipulation or interference with having to do or using frequencies on the human neurology, on the human body. That should not be occurring. It also should not be occurring that universal laws are being forcibly obstructed and regressed either. The one that stands off to the right that monitors, that I perceive to be reptilian and high up in their hierarchy, and or the leader of that species, has recently become very, very frenzied in his tactics, in his instruction to the other two. Now, that group, whether they are hybridized or clones, which they do use clones forcibly connected to me, but they themselves, with that group, they take from prior civilizations the worst of the worst, and then clone them, and then get them, have them do their bidding. And this group is so insane that they are willing to violate universal laws. The reptilians use them as surrogates, patsies, throwaways, scapegoats. Now, that group does not see themselves as that, but they are that. The reptilians try to do that in a removed fashion to try and circumvent universal laws. The one on the right that stands off to the side is extremely involved in what these two force. And it seems like he's the one that comes up with the ideas and then tries to have them implement. Now, this one has tried to pass himself off as an angelic. If he were a true angelic, and if this was hypothetically if it was meant for him to be doing these things as an angelic, number one, he would not be delegating. And in addition to that, it would not be him if it were some kind of a circumstance in where, like, let's say a really bad person was going to be, I guess in biblical terms, if you were going to say, like, somebody who, you know, was a really bad person and was going to hell, were then tortured by demons, well, you wouldn't then have, like, what am I trying to say with that? If it were meant for him to do that, he would not be delegating. He would just be doing it. If he were right, he would be doing it himself and not trying to do it in a removed fashion, trying to evade universal laws, if he were in the right. So that is one more indication that that is not an angelic. And there was a time early on that the torture, when it first started, and I'll say in the beginning years when their torture started, and then at some point after that, I developed my abilities. There was a time that I moved what that entity was forcing directly to the creator. And immediately, I had a vision of that entity immediately rot. Like his face started to rot, and his form started to, the rest of him started to rot, and he almost like he was disappearing, like that that movie, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where the one in the painting, something gray, when the vampire showed him his painting and he started to rot and dissipate, that's kind of what happened when I moved, because he had tried to pass himself off as an angelic, and then at one point the creator. And when I moved his stuff, when I moved what was being forced on me to the creator, and then he started to rot, that was when things got real fucking weird. And at that point, I knew that he was not the creator, but claiming to be the creator, but not an angelic. Okay, so moving on. Back to now. I perceive that one to be reptilian. And what is being said is that they are trying to, or imply, it's more implied, because they force quite a bit into my emotional body and into my intuitive sensories. I'm sorry, one moment. It's raining. That they are trying to keep this inverted time loop matrix in place, and that they are trying to get as many as they can into the AI system. And I have refused, sorry about the noise, I have refused consent for that as well. On these recordings, I have said that I am constantly working on pulling everything that has been forcibly raped from me out of any and all AI systems and technologies. There is a time element to this. What they are not used to doing is having to regress so much. So I move every day, all day, what they're forcing to universal laws as best I can. And they continue to forcibly obstruct and regress. They are also trying to prevent any true benevolent beings from knowing the actual truth of things, perceiving the actual truth of things. They are not used to humans knowing about these things, and they are also not used to humans openly talking about these things. So as I do recordings, the more nervous they become, and their fear raises exponentially. Now, I don't know that there are true benevolent. I mean, I think that there are a few true benevolent beings subscribed to my channel that hear these recordings and that may, to some degree, understand the things that I'm talking about, expressing and stating, and that there might be a few that have had either similar experiences or know of others that have had those experiences. They seem to be extremely nervous about other true benevolent beings hearing what I'm talking about. And because there is a time element, because of the planetary parasite the universe is at the end of a very large cycle. And if you take a look at the state of humanity, you can see how far humanity has regressed and how much they have affected humanity with what they have forced and done here. And that the planetary parasite is it uses its offspring, the reptilians, and then they use the group to do their bidding in the AI system. But the planetary parasite is trying to rape what it can and move on. What I perceive to be trying to gain access to a higher dimension with what it's raped. If you take a look at the state of humanity, if you are, because they use humanity as a food source, looking at humanity, seems to me that what I'm perceiving is that most of the food is gone. And what they do is they use the AI system to rape, and they also use the AI system to store things, to store frequencies, vibrations, energies, knowledge, wisdom, anything that they've raped from humanity, from any other races in the AI system, so that the planetary parasite has that for, in the past, it has had what it has raped stored in order to use that to pass itself off as a benevolent being, as well as wearing those frequencies and vibrations to help pass itself off as a benevolent being. So what happens is, at some point, as they get ready to try and move on, they turn off the fence. Because they, in the past, and I'm speaking that way specifically, because I'm not giving them any quarter, and I'm not trying to, I'm not going to do any manifesting for them. So in the past, when they went to harvest a civilization, they raped what they could, murdered any evidence, ones that they couldn't turn, ones that can see, ones that have the eyes to see, true benevolent beings of the true benevolent creator. And that knew what they were doing, that knew of what they were doing, that refused consent, that fight, that stood up and fought. So what they did is they got as many as they could into the AI system and then murdered the rest. Or at least tried to murder the rest. I'll rephrase, tried to murder the rest so that they could turn off the fence and move on. Because the fence is being used to, it's an overlay, it's an artificial frequency overlay in order to deceive the inhabitants to confuse them, to get them to believe the lies, to interfere with the true organic field. And once they've tried to get as many as they could into the AI system, and that when they were ready to move on, they would turn off the fence at that point, after they had tried to murder whatever walking, breathing evidence was left. And doing forced regressions does affect things. Forced interference and obstruction of universal laws and universal law correction on some level, to some degree, affects things. Affects the balance in the universe. It affects the inner workings of the universe. It does affect, on some level, all beings in the universe. So there is a time element, and that it seems like they are trying to wrap things up, and there are still true benevolent beings here who are not going along with the program, not going along with their agenda, not going along with their goals. However, most of those benevolent beings don't necessarily see the full picture. They're thinking of it in different terms, or perceiving it somewhat in a different way, like in a biblical way, or not seeing that it's actually a planetary parasite. I'm trying to come to a point here. So they're not used to having to do all the forced regressions. I would think that there are other beings, other true benevolent beings here who are also fighting back, who are using their abilities to help protect themselves. I don't know if there are any others actually moving their violations to universal laws. I know that I have encouraged that, but I don't know if there actually are. But they're not. I know that they are not used to doing this amount of forced regression, and because of what the planetary parasite is raping to try and use and wear to protect itself once it's exposed to universal laws, all forced regressions, in order to balance that out, it seems like I'm perceiving that they have to do some really fucked up shit in order to balance out the forced regressions. I don't have any more details on that. Other than that, but it does seem like that. So here we are in this time, in this place, and they're doing their nasty. They're doing their what they have done in prior civilizations, and we're at that point where they are using the technology to try and rape what they can, and then trying to locate the true benevolent beings of the true benevolent creator and trying to murder them. Because at some point, they're going to want to turn off the fence, and the planetary parasite is trying to move on with everything that it's raped. Which is a big reason as to why I have been doing these recordings. And trying to help others see some of the larger aspects of what is being forced on this planet, and what and or who is doing the forcing. I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. They spend a lot of time trying to interfere with my organic frequencies and vibrations. They also spend a lot of time trying to rape from me against the full revocation of my consent. It should not be that there is obstruction in universal laws. As we learn and we raise our frequency and vibration, what is learned via experience and attained via experience and learning and understanding, and then as a result, knowledge and wisdom, we have every right to be protecting ourselves from malevolence with what we have attained and learned through our experience, and that it should not be raped from us. And there should not be a parasitic species, number one, in manifested creation, but number two, using technology to forcibly regress a race over and over. As that species has been doing in prior civilizations and is trying to do it again in this one. And they have used so many lies on this race, and have, I can't articulate the magnitude of trauma and harm that has been forced on this race over millennia, many millennia, and many civilizations. And technically, that is not our fear. That is not our trauma. That is not our harm. It has been forced by a parasitic species that is using humanity as a food source. And then that species has been raping what this race has attained in order to then gain access to higher dimensions and pass itself off as a benevolent being, when that is not what that is. It's a parasite. And then in knowing that, looking at this universe and how this universe operates, and looking at what and or who has allowed these parasites to do what they are doing. Especially with universal laws. That is not allowed. That technology, the cloning technology, the frequency weaponry, it really only has one intent. That technology is not allowed in this universe. It is not. So for a planetary parasite and its offspring to be using that technology here is an abomination. And the questions that need to be asked are who or what is allowing parasites to be here, and who is or what is allowing parasites to be using that technology and doing what it's doing with universal laws. And now we're dealing with the time element in where they're trying to force beings into the AI system, and then trying to forcibly murder the ones who aren't going along with it. Because in an evolved state, we are the living evidence. We are walking, breathing evidence that in the presence of universal laws, we could, our embodiment of the truth would immediately terminate them. They would burn where they stand. And if you were to think on how many races, how many civilizations, planets, star systems that species has done this to, their removal from existence would be immediate, with true benevolent beings holding and radiating the actual truth in the presence of universal laws. Which is why the one that stands off to my right, well, as well as the other ones, but that one, whether he's head of the reptilian species or in their hierarchy, becomes increasingly and exponentially nervous and more fearful, especially with every recording that I do. Because it's interfering I'm going to rephrase, as the planetary parasite is trying to do what it's doing. And there are ones who are fighting back. It is trying to murder. But we're also getting to a point where more true benevolent beings are realizing what the fuck is going on. And that means more embodied truth in the presence of universal laws when they go to shut off the fence. And yet, not shutting off the fence and continuing in what they're doing also forces more true benevolent beings to wake up or to realize the truth of things. Can you see? So there are those out there that might think that there is like more time, or that things will just continue to move along, or that there will be more, just that there will be more time. And they're not recognizing or realizing that we are at a precipice, that we are at a climactic point. And that most of what is being pushed are lies in order to lull people into some kind of a comfortable state, or anesthetized, I want to say anesthetized, ignorant state. They're trying to pass things off as normal, that things, the way that things are progressing is just progress. It's lies. And hopefully I'm really hoping that there are true benevolent beings that are hearing these recordings that do not hold ill intent towards me, that have been doing their own investigations, intuiting, perceiving, interrogations of the entities that I have talked about, have been doing their own questioning and looking inward and trying to search their DNA and their blood and their genetics and their cells and their prior lifetimes and their whatever memories they do have with regards to prior civilizations, and can be seeing the truth from their own vantage point. And can really see where things are at. It's tragic that much of this race has been cloned out, and that many beings have taken all of the trauma and the harm that's been forced here as their own. And yes, it has been forced on them, and yet it's not theirs. It's fear. It's the fear that belongs to that species, to the parasite, for doing what it has done all this time. It's its fear. It's its fear of being found out. It's its fear of being exposed to universal laws with no protection. It's the planetary parasite's fear. Are you seeing? It's the planetary parasite's fear being forced via its proxy offspring or its offspring proxies and the AI system, as well as this universe. Now, it can still be argued, is there an entity and or consciousness and or awareness and or intelligence, and those are all in quotes, that is this universe? Or is this universe just a place, just a manifested place in where beings emerge into this place from elsewhere, from the actual source of all, right? So which is it? Personally, I have always perceived that there has been, before I knew about all of this, I perceived there to be an intelligence and an awareness and or a consciousness that is this universe and or that runs and operates this universe. Now, if there is one, it's not any of those things. It's a fucking parasite, or it's a psychotic, it's an entity. It's a psychotic entity that is parasitic and that assists smaller parasites and also rapes from benevolent life force energy in order to remain in the same space as universal laws. We're getting to very shortly a climactic point, and I'm not going to give time frames because I don't know. I am more so feeling it because of the nervousness and anxiousness and fear of the one that stands off to my right that monitors everything, because I perceive that entity to be reptilian. And then I no longer have communication with the planetary parasite. However, that the planetary parasite is trying to forcibly rape from me via the female entity using the clone forcibly attached to me. Because of my attainment and my abilities and my understanding of what it is, what it's been doing, what it has done, and what it's trying to do now. And I have refused consent on all levels, dimensions, and timelines of my being, including the quantum cellular DNA and genetic level of my being, in being murdered, raped, have these parasitic entities forcibly connected to me, in having any kind of technology forcibly connected to me, for all forced magic, for all forced harm, and for anything that they have raped from me to be worn or used in anything that they are doing. And because that group is willing to violate universal laws, the things, and because of where this entire thing is, and like the goal of the planetary parasite, where this is all at, and at the time that we're in, with regards to their goals, I'm sure that any true benevolent beings listening can see what the planetary parasite and its offspring are trying to do as far as the lengths that they have been going to. And I am not backing down. And I am refusing consent. And continue to do so every day, all day. And continue to move their violations directly to universal laws manually. And continue to do recordings. And to try and help other true benevolent beings, any that might be listening, to understand what is being forced here, what is being done here, and who and what is forcing it. Because it sure doesn't seem to give any fucks about an entire race. And just seeing the amount of beings, what they have already done to many beings here. How many are lost? How many true benevolent souls has this entity, I don't even want to say the word, harmed? I'll just say harmed to such a degree that some of those beings may not, their souls might not I don't even like to say it. I'm sure that you could, any true benevolent being can see where I'm going with that. Because I don't even want to say it out loud. But looking at the state of humanity and how many beings have been turned, cloned out, hybridized, have been forced to check out through things forced on them that were not theirs, and have such vicious atrocity forced on them that they were basically forced to check out. And I'm talking about the ones that are already have gone or have left. And that no wonder there's quite a few beings here that are adamant that they don't ever want to come back here. Not that there's going to be anything to come back to after, I don't want to say after, but like, let's just say this time around, or at this time, that at this point in time, that their decision would be to never come back here. And that the reptilian species is trying to continue in this same fashion somewhere else. That should give you an indication as to what has happened in this universe. And there doesn't seem to be, at this moment, a true benevolent, larger force adulting. What happened there? If this planetary parasite has been doing this to entire races, I have extrapolated and asked the question as to what it has been doing to larger creator gods, larger creator beings. And that this parasite, planetary parasite, spends its time trying to murder the children of whatever, of a creator. I think it does this. I think it seeks out benevolent life force energy, benevolent creators, and then tries to mate with that creator in order to then make food. Now, there's the question, is that accurate? Would it really be the mother? I guess it depends on how you perceive those kinds of things as to how we arrived here, or how we, where we come from, and those kinds of topics. But there are many questions there that I have asked, and not too many of them have answers. It's been more of, again, triangulation, deduction, connecting dots, critical thinking, logic, and reason, going by what is not said, going by behavior, and then there has been actual physical things forced and done and said. Specifically by that planet, by the planetary parasite, but things forced and done that have shown how this place is run and how that species operates. And then by that, extrapolate further out and look at the lack of intervention, the lack of assistance, what's being forced here, the forced obstruction in universal laws and universal law correction, and many other things that show the truth of the universe itself. Now, there are still many questions unanswered there, but anyway, I'm sorry for I'm trying to make this flow, and they're forcibly interfering with my energy and my emotional body. I'm sorry that it's not more flowing. I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here to see if there is more that I need to go over. Just be aware of the time element, that they will be forced to turn off the fence. And that the tactics and methods that they are using now are indicative of their fear, their level of fear and anxiety. Be aware that it is their fear, and that what they are, if you personally are having or are experiencing nastiness being forced on you, that it's not yours, it's the result of their fear, and they're trying to murder evidence. And that refusing consent, even though they try to continue to force what they're forcing, refusing consent, and will still save your ass in the presence of universal laws. And also be aware that it is extremely important that you realize what is not yours, and that you are releasing with every cell, fiber, and molecule of your being all forced trauma and forced harm and forced fear that is not yours. From the totality of your being, from every cell, fiber, and molecule of your being, either directly back to the originating source, meaning you can say that, or you can just release it, and then in releasing it, it will also go back to the originating source, because you are refusing to take responsibility for it. You are refusing to accept that as yours. It has no choice but to go back to the originating source. And that you do not want those things attached to you in the presence of universal laws. Because universal laws is going by your energy, your frequency, your vibration, your resonance. So you do not want those things. You do not want to be holding those things within you. You do not want to be holding fear. You do not want to be holding trauma. You do not want to be accepting those things as yours. You need to be releasing them and returning them, because you do not want universal laws reading those things in you if they are not yours. Because then, just as they are fearful of the consequences of holding fear and holding any kind of shame or guilt or denial or any of that, then it will, like, it's going by, it's going, like I said, it's going by your frequency, your vibration, your resonance, your light. Can you see, just by what I've just said, how they have been with that deceiving or loopholing in the past, how they have been loopholing universal laws via technology and trying to force all their fear and their nasty and all their shit onto benevolent beings. And then once they turn off the fence, if there's no true benevolent being holding the actual truth of things, embodying the truth, that it's them forcing their nasty, it's them who are the ones deceiving universal laws via technology, that it's them, that all of that fear actually belongs to, that all of that trauma and that harm actually belongs to, that's how they've been trying to use the AI system to try and force their shit onto races, onto humanity in this case, and getting them to believe those things via lies, cons, and deceit, getting to believe those things about themselves, those things are not theirs. But they're using the AI system and lies, cons, and deceptions to do it. So when they turn off the fence and everybody, whoever's left, is fully exposed to universal laws, and universal laws is going by, the frequency, vibration, light, sound, energy, and resonance of beings, if they've taken that on, all of that nasty on as their own, hopefully they haven't. Hopefully, I'll just say, hopefully those beings have not. I'll say it this way, and then you'll be able to see what is being said there. That hopefully beings are not taking on the fear and the trauma and the harm as their own, because it's not theirs. It needs to be returned to the originating sources, to the parasites. All of that fear, all the harm, all the trauma, even though beings here have been traumatized, it needs to be released, because it is not the human races. It's not ours. It's been forced via parasites and technology. And then from that, you can see what they've been doing in this universe and what they are now trying to do to this civilization, this race. And that many here have not understood what has been going on here and what has been being forced here, and by the entities forcing it. So there have been many beings in the past here that have not had the time to realize and see what the actual truth of it is, and had time to release those things back to the originating source. Which is why humanity has had the level of if you just take a look around, you can see evidence of that. And why so many beings here have adamantly stated that they would never come back here. And that is the reason why. That goes for the animals too. What they have done to animals here is so abhorrent and sickening. So I will say now, that you need to be doing your best to release what is not yours, all the harm, the fear, the trauma. Even if you have been traumatized by it, do your best to come to understanding and reconcile any of the trauma and the harm that has been forced as not yours, and do your best to release it from as much of yourself as you can, from every cell, fiber, and molecule of your being as you can, from all levels, dimensions, and timelines of your being, including the cellular, DNA, genetic, and all levels of your being. And do your best to be operating out of truth, honor, and integrity, and courage as best you can. Stand in your authority, stand in your power. Know that you have every right to do so, that you have every right to protect yourself, that you have every right to fight back, that you have every right to refuse consent, for what is being forced, and you have every right, because of the forced interference in universal laws, you have every right to be moving those violations or things that are being forced on you to universal laws. I'm sorry, one moment, they're really trying to interfere. And do your best to operate out of the highest capacities and faculties of your own being that you can now. And that until a larger, true benevolent force intervenes here, that it is you saving you. And to do your best to remove all forced universal law violations that have been forced onto parts of your being that have been raped from you without your knowledge and consent, and or against the revocation of your consent, either directly to universal laws or back to the originating source. All right. Until next time.